I am very happy to celebrate this 25th anniversary with Bonsai Empire. Congratulations, many of my very best wishes, and it's truly incredible that you've been diligently improving this wonderful bonsai community for such a remarkably long period of time. So let's now proceed to answer the important question you've thoughtfully asked me, which is precisely the following. How can I effectively reduce the overall size of my bonsai's leaves, and should I apply any specific technique to successfully achieve this desired outcome? To comprehensively answer this important question, I'm going to carefully break it down into several truly important points which you absolutely need to keep in mind from the very beginning. Number one, for me, is the particular species you acquire, and the genetic characteristics of that specific species are very, very important. You have to always keep in mind that when you acquire a bonsai, or perhaps you already have one in your cherished collection, you should absolutely know from the very start whether that particular species is truly suitable for having a small leaf size. If we carefully analyze each and every species, you'll clearly see that there are some genetic varieties that from the very outset naturally have a significantly smaller size than other varieties. I have many wild European olives, and some already have a larger size regardless of what we'll talk about later, whether it's due to applied techniques, the amount of sun they receive, etc. The species and genetics are important. When you acquire a bonsai or have a specific goal in mind regarding its ultimate size, it's important to keep that particular aspect in mind. Keep in mind that a smaller size is going to be more important for a mame, a shohin, or a shuin than for a larger tree that measures 1 meter by 1 meter, where we'll have a bit more leeway and flexibility. So, choosing well from the very start is truly important. The specific species I'm acquiring and carefully paying attention to the smallest leaves will ultimately determine whether the final result over the years is more optimal or not, and whether the leaf size is perfectly proportional to your bonsai. That's important. So that's the very first thing you absolutely need to keep in mind in order to successfully achieve a tree with beautifully small leaves. Now then, there are different techniques, various different things we can potentially do. Let's now move on to the next important point, number two. Should I apply any specific technique to effectively reduce the overall size of the leaf? We can apply several techniques. First of all, it fundamentally starts with the very basics, which is the essential root ball, beginning with the careful selection of the appropriate substrate. That is to say, if I happen to have a particularly large tree, I can certainly use a slightly larger and more substantial substrate size because the extensive roots will also be perfectly proportional to the impressive aerial part of the plant. That is, if according to the size of the tree I choose a finer substrate and gradually achieve finer roots proportional to the size of the tree, that will also help me, so that later there is balance and the leaf size is consistent as a result. That could certainly be one thing we could do. Obviously, it is also very important to consider that the more root ramification and the more branch ramification we cultivate, the smaller the leaves will become. This occurs because the distribution of energy and resources is different compared to an initial pre-bonsai formation state with primary branches, where there is a tendency for longer internodes and larger leaves. This is because the tree tries to seek more light and receives a different kind of energy that doesn't need to be distributed among a lot of ramification and a large number of leaves. So the more you ramify your tree, the smaller your leaves will be. And as I mentioned before, depending on the genetics, you will achieve a maximum, or in this case, a minimum maximum leaf size. So To encourage ramification, try not to let your bonsai remain only at the primary, secondary, or tertiary branch level, which is something I see very often. Depending on the species, we have the ability to achieve a great deal of ramification. So apply pruning, apply partial defoliation so that light can enter and you can branch and branch again. Depending on the species, that's a topic that could go on for, it's a rather extensive topic to explain everything fully, but the more you meticulously ramify, the deeper you go into the intricate ramification for that specific species and succeed, the more you'll also be able to achieve the optimal size, whether you desire a very small bonsai or a slightly larger one, depending on the precise target size and the aesthetic proportions you want to achieve. So, by applying various different techniques, we will also be able to achieve that more compact size. I can show you several illustrative examples of various leaves so you can clearly see that depending on the specific stage of development and the particular species, even within the very same species, the overall size can indeed change quite drastically, even though it's fundamentally the same type of tree. Another truly important point to always keep in mind is the precise location and the exact number of hours of glorious sunlight your precious bonsai receives. Today is a rather cloudy day. I'm currently in the beautiful Mediterranean region, specifically in Mallorca, and here we generally have quite a significant number of hours of bright sunlight. So it's not going to be the same if the hours of sunlight where you live, for example, if you live in Ireland or in Northern Europe, where it's usually cloudy for longer periods of time, you won't have the same chances of achieving small leaf size as I do here in the Mediterranean region, since that factor will also have a direct impact, and you need to keep this aspect in mind. So, depending on the species we acquire and where you are located, that will also directly influence the size of the leaf. So here we have a very clear and distinct example of an Acer palmatum with a noticeable imbalance between the overall size of the leaves in this particular area. If I carefully cut a few for you to observe, compared to these other leaves over here, we can very clearly and distinctly see that the actual sizes are completely and utterly different. So, within this tree, most likely due to the amount of light it has received and the techniques that have been applied, there is an imbalance in terms of size. So here, for example, what we could do is a type of partial defoliation, which is to reduce the leaf size throughout this entire area here. We could also thin out a bit here, allowing more light to truly get in at this moment. But one very effective thing we could do is to make all the leaves the same size, so that the tree then gets used to distributing its energy evenly throughout the whole tree, so that it doesn't grow stronger on one side while the other side stays weaker, and so on. So if we carefully apply this particular type of defoliation, we can effectively cut the leaves all over the entire tree without any significant problem. Whenever we work, we can effectively balance the tree, and this process will help it to branch out and make it progressively easier and easier to reduce the leaf size, aiming for a similar size. And as I mentioned, the more branching there is, the smaller the leaf size will ultimately be. Here we can clearly see that this part is less branched than here, and here the leaf size is smaller than in this area. So it's important to keep in mind that everything we've mentioned earlier applies not only to achieving a smaller leaf size, but also, for example, as with this Thunbergy pine, if we want to get a smaller needle, or with the Juniperus Itoigawa, or other specific species you may have with different types of foliage, it's truly important to possess comprehensive knowledge of that particular species, its inherent growth patterns, and precisely what horticultural techniques you can effectively apply throughout the entire year to achieve more refined ramification, a better sense of overall balance, and ultimately beautiful foliage that is perfectly proportional to the actual size of the tree and to the artistic design and specific style you ultimately want to convey with your cherished tree. So, I genuinely believe that this understanding is far more important than always trying to achieve the absolute smallest possible size. For me, it is undeniably better if the foliage and overall structure are perfectly proportional to the magnificent tree we are cultivating. So, I truly want to thank Bonsai Empire very much for graciously including me in this truly special 25th anniversary. I could certainly keep talking about this fascinating topic, and indeed we could go much deeper, but I sincerely hope this presentation has genuinely helped you to thoughtfully consider a few more important things that will undoubtedly assist you in achieving your personal goals. See you next time, and thank you once again. Goodbye for now.